because every Vossian is a Van Tillian and every Van Tillian is a Vossian, ideally, in terms of their theological convictions and the way Voss basically tutored Van Til at Princeton,
Well, yeah,
as
Van Til
Danny
would say as
Olinger
much.
has shown us. You could write, if our listeners want to do this, over in the margin there beside kernel revelation, you could write rationalism. And then over in the margin with the divination theory, you could write irrationalism. And let
Oh,
me explain.
oh yeah.
The prophets on the divination theory, they're not given any unique uh, knowledge from God per se, but they have some kind of universal, mysterious insight or knowledge into things divine on par with other religious gurus or inspiring religious leaders. And so this isn't the bare rationalism where you've got a prophet who has some unique intuition, and then he starts to just verbalize that intuition with his own fallible words. But there's some kind of more holistic, mysterious insight into matters religious. And Voss makes this point that there may be examples of this in Scripture. And Camden, if you can, you pull up Deuteronomy 13,
Sure.
1 through 2. He uses this as an example of prophets and dreamers of dreams who give a sign and a wonder that comes to pass. And that therefore qualifies them, at least formally, it qualifies them as a prophet of God, right? Because if the words come to pass, this is a prophet. If they don't, this is not a prophet. Yet, the bottom of 215, they seduce the people through the prestige thus obtained toward idolatry. So, this is a fascinating thing. Could you read that and just
Sure.
comment on it?
Yeah, Deuteronomy 13, 1 and 2 says, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, continuing on into verse 3, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul.
Yeah. Now, so here, what Voss is saying is that there could be, and there was, in fact, in Israel, someone with what you'd have to grant as some kind of supernatural insight into the future. But if that prophet leads you to worship other gods, then what can you be sure of? Well, you can be sure that he is on par more with the magicians of Egypt than with Moses, right? And so what Voss is saying here is that instead of this being some kind of rationalistic intuition of ethical principles that are then set forth in speech, a traditional old school liberal reading of liberalism back into the prophets. The problem with this view is it reduces prophetism to the superstitious and magical manipulations that accompany pagan religion. It reduces prophetism to some universal occult practice, is the best way I know how to put it. And Voss doesn't say this. Camden, I'd love your thoughts on this. Voss doesn't say this explicitly, but this view blurs the line between supernatural revelation from God, that, and how do you know it's revelation from God? A, what it says comes to pass, and B, you are moved to worship and adore the living and true God. But blurs the line between that God who supernaturally reveals himself and the occult practices from religions that revel in mystery. I'm thinking, for instance, Paul dealt with some form of mystery religion in Colossae,
Right.
right? The
Mm-hmm.
idea that you can have if the Colossian heresy is a hybrid of proto embryonic Gnosticism on the one side and some form of the Judaizing error, then what they were telling the Christians in Colossae is that you can be initiated into some special kind of knowledge that bypasses the verbal revelation of God, and you need to listen to us because we have it. Something like that
You get
is,
that with some forms of charismaticism and modern evangelicalism in certain quarters. I encountered this when I was in college. And there were people that were interested with books by folks such as Watchman Nee. And what this goes along with is also typically a tripartite understanding of human nature. So not only is man a body and a soul, but man is a body, a soul, and a spirit. And not everyone who's tripartite will hold to these other conclusions, but a tripartite view allows for there to be a distinction between somebody's mind and rationality and their spirit and emotion, so that perhaps God could be speaking to you or teaching you one thing in one aspect or dimension of your life that may or may not conflict with, or at least apparently with, what your mind is telling you or other aspects. Now, granted, God is incomprehensible. We're not rationalists. But what God has clearly said in Deuteronomy 13, he's like, look, you might have feelings, you might have interpretations of things that you perceive. There might be various religious phenomena. There might even be a guy who says he's going to do something, and it happens.
he does it.
And he does it. But he says, if that conflicts with what I've already revealed to you in my word very clearly, infallibly, authoritatively, then don't go along with what this other guy says, because all of my revelation, effectively what the Lord is saying, is, again, organic. We can't make this division between different types of revelation in the sense of, well, it seems to be conflicting, but let's go with one aspect or let's go with another aspect. And you get all sorts of other permutations of that error throughout the ages, but it's helpful the way Voss brings us back to the foundational aspect here.